Okay, great. So, welcome. Yeah, this evening, Wednesday evening. It feels like it's been a while since we've done this. I know last week we had Samhain and all of that loveliness that it brings. Tonight we're going to work on a similar theme of November, and I've got a few slides that I'm going to go through. So I'm just going to mute. There's a few people off mute. If you don't mind, I'm just going to mute you. Yeah, you've done it already. Thank you, guys. Sorry, it's just the background noise. Okay, so we've a bit to cover today because I've got an invitation for you, and let me just go to my little slideshow here. Okay, so November, we started with 7th of November was True Sound, which is last Sunday, and last Thursday, we connected with the energy of sound because we were building up to it. In the Celtic wheel, Samhain is crossing the threshold from autumn into winter. And according to the Celtic wheel, it's crossing the threshold from the direction of west into north. And north is that winter phase, it's the death phase, it is the quiet phase, it is the letting go, not so much that, well, a bit of letting go, most of that is done in November, but it's the resting, it's the reflecting that's going inwards. There's certain themes around north and winter and death that we're going to explore over the course of November. Now, don't worry, we're not going to get dark about it. Death is a necessary part of life, and we're just going to be exploring it in a very light way. We're not delving into it. But what I wanted to start with is a couple of things tonight. Number one is that ancestors. So I was talking about this in the sound call. I'm not sure if all of you made it. But November is a lovely time, not only for sound, we have All Souls Day as well, but it's a lovely time to really honor our ancestors, those who have gone before us, our grandparents, our great-great-grandparents, the people we knew, and perhaps the people that we didn't know, but all the people who lived and thrived and survived and loved so that we could be here and present in this world. So if you wish, November, it would be a lovely time to do a ceremony for your ancestors. You could, for example, go to the graves of your parents, your grandparents, your great-great-grandparents, if you know where they are, of course. You could do some work on your family tree. You could put some flowers, plant some flowers in your garden, some daffodils this time of year and crocuses in honor of your ancestors. Or you could go into a church if you're so inclined and light a candle, or you could just light a candle every evening over the month of November, every night to honor your ancestors. Like, there are just some ideas that you could use, but to really be conscious of that this month, because it really is a nice ritual to get into to honor those. And you never know, someday somebody could be doing the same thing for you without sounding too morbid about it. But ancestors they're really important in November. And the other thing as well I wanted to recap on for Samhain is, as we cross this threshold from letting go into that death phase, into that resting and replenishing and really kind of refilling our cup, start thinking about the things that you want to let go of. I said this in the sound call, but I wanted to touch in on it again, that if there's something in your schedule that you can just drop for November and December, perhaps January, that would be great. Maybe it might be pressure that you put on yourself, or maybe an expectation that you're going to go to the gym 5 times a week. Can you drop it to maybe 4 times a week? Or if you feel like you have to have the house clean all the time, can you let go of the mess in the house? Or can you just pull back somewhere your energy, because you won't have the same amount of energy for November, December, January as you will do the rest of the months of the year. So that's working with your energy field, and it just makes sense. What I want to talk to you about today, it sounds like a little bit of a depressing subject, but it's not. It is actually a liberating subject, and it's about suffering. So one of the teachings of the North is non-suffering, or suffering. So Buddha talked about suffering a lot, and suffering sounds very dramatic and very much, when there's a pain, when there's a dagger in my heart, then I suffer. When something big happens to me, then I suffer. But the Buddha talked about how suffering is in everything that we do, that we are the creators of our suffering, that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. Everyone suffers, it's part of the human condition, and your suffering can be a doorway to your personal evolution, to growth and expansion, if you choose to shift your thoughts and perceptions. So what that means is, when something happens in our lives, say, for example, it's a red light. The red light is something inevitable. We can't do anything about the red light. The suffering that we bring into our lives is our reaction to that red light. If we start thinking, that's typical, I got a red light, I always get a red light, my life is crap, I have the red lights all over my life, this is ridiculous, this is terrible, this is blah, 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 blah. That's the suffering part. Something happens in our life, somebody says something to us, or we get bad news at work or in a personal life. The suffering is how much we stay stuck in it, how much we contribute to the story of our suffering, of how much we talk about it, how much we relive it and rehash it. That's our suffering. And it's not that we are going to tonight go, oh my God, I suffer so much and I contribute to my own suffering, because that's actually not helpful or beneficial. But what I wanted to do tonight is to maybe give you some ideas of where you might be contributing to your own suffering, where you might be expanding it, and where perhaps you can limit the amount of suffering that you experience on a daily basis. So the Buddha created 4 noble truths, and they are kind of keys to the path of enlightenment, the eightfold path of enlightenment. And those 4 noble truths were basically that everyone suffers, and that as we're living human, breathing humans, we suffer. That's just the nature of who we are. And we're not alone in our suffering. And there's no such thing as getting rid of suffering. There's not a case that we're never going to have any suffering. But what we can do is begin to limit it. And when we limit our suffering, then we're free. We have more energy to create the things that we want to create. We're much more resilient. We're able to respond to situations more than stay stuck in them and stay rehashing the situation over and over again. So let me explain a little bit more about this, and we'll go through what exactly is the cause of suffering, and it might actually help to prompt you on where you might be, because not all of this list now that's created here for you is going to be you, but you might have certain areas that actually go, okay, actually, I really do that. So again, this is about becoming aware with compassion to where you might be contributing to your levels of suffering. So we can stop our own suffering by understanding the root of what causes us to suffer and then taking action, whether it's shifting our inner dialogue or doing things differently. Okay, so some of the main causes of suffering. Well, first one is resistance to impermanence. This means that we want things to stay exactly the same. That we want a relationship to stay the same, or we want our body to stay the same, or we want our lives to stay the same. That we are not open to the fact that everything is cyclical, everything moves. And if we want it to remain the same, if we don't want anything to change, then that actually causes us suffering, because that's not the nature of life. The nature of life is to move through that wheel of spring, summer, autumn, winter, and to keep moving through it and keep changing. And that's life, and we move through with it. But if we resist that impermanence, then everything has to stay exactly like this. That causes us suffering. The second cause of suffering is seeing yourself as separate and disconnected. This causes a lot of suffering. And it's so interesting when we use the words, especially in the English language of I am blank, whatever you want to fill it in. That actually, in that dialogue, in the language of it, it separates us, because we think that we're separate to the we are. And thinking that we are separate means that we feel and we tune into this feeling that I am suffering on my own, that nobody else is feeling this the way that I am feeling. And that causes us huge suffering. And we're going to do a technique by Kristen Neff today. And part of her alleviation of suffering, the way that she helps to kind of build compassion and reduce suffering, the second step of it is to say, I am not alone. Whatever I'm feeling now, somebody else in the world is feeling this. Somebody has felt it before in the past, somebody will feel it in the future, but there's at least one other person in the world that is feeling as I am feeling now. And when we really tune into that, we can see, oh, okay, I'm not alone. I'm not alone in this pain. And that was a big part of what's happened in the last year and a half, is we felt so separate and disconnected from other people. But just simply by acknowledging and saying, okay, somebody else is feeling this way too, and I'm not mad, I'm not crazy for feeling like this, somebody else is feeling it. We feel connected then to the collective, because we are not separate. I am separates us, but it is we are. I feel as other people feel. Another cause of suffering, clinging to your identity. You know, I don't know if it applies to anybody in our group, but thinking that, you know, my name is Ellen, I live in this, and I have this kind of a house and that kind of a salary, and I have this kind of, clinging to all of those things around us, that causes us huge, because it brings us back to cause number one, which is resistance to impermanence, because your identity is going to constantly change, and we're going to be constantly evolving with it. Number four, wanting reality to be something that's not, wanting it to be a sunny day when it's raining, wanting life to be different than what it is in the moment, wanting to be on holidays when it's the middle of winter, wanting it to be the weekend when it's a Monday morning, wanting reality to be something it's not. That causes us a huge amount of suffering as well, because we're feeling like we're not in the here and now, that we're projecting ourselves into some other time than now. We're not truly alive to the present moment, and that causes us a level of suffering or anxiety or kind of discomfort within. Number five, I think we learned this a lot on our spiritual path, listening to outside forces instead of your own truth. How many times in the past, you know, when we were younger, where we'd ask everybody and anybody their opinion. And I think probably as we grow and we mature and we get to know ourselves, we realize that people's opinions are, though they're coming from such a lovely place and such a heartfelt place, they're based on their own reality, not particularly your reality. And sometimes the more that we ask for opinions from other people, the more we get confused, and the more that we get up in our head, and the more we can't see the wood from the tree. So that causes us suffering, because it actually disempowers us from listening to our own truth. Of course, we can ask for the opinions of other people, but really it's first and foremost to listen to your own truth and to go with that, your own intuition. And again, Soul Seekers is all part of that. Another form of suffering is living from the outside in. So that lovely, lovely sentence that I love to talk about, I'll be happy when. I'll be happy when I have a car. I'll be happy when I have a partner. I'll be happy when I have a house. I'll be happy when I'm size 6. I'll be happy when, all of those things, living from the outside in, external circumstances having to be a certain way before you're happy inside. And really, always, we all know what the spiritual path is. And Eckhart Tolle says, get the inside right and the outside falls into place. So it's the other way around. So if we live from the outside in, that causes us a level of suffering. Now, you could be nodding your head at all of these things. I don't want you to change all of these things in one go over the course of the month, but maybe pick out one or two things that are really standing out for you that you're going to focus on perhaps this month. Choosing fear over love. I love this, and it's so true, because we so often react from a place of fear than a place of love. And switching that around and making your daily intention from a place of love rather than a place of fear. Because if you operate from a place of fear and make decisions out of that, you're causing more suffering for yourself. Of course you are, because you're making decisions tainted with that energy. Whereas if you stop and say, okay, I'm centering myself and making this choice out of love, then you're paving the way for an avenue lined with love. Living in the past and the future, of course, I think we all know that we're rehashing things from conversations and situations from the past, how that causes us suffering. Or again, living in the future, linked into some of the things that I've already said, waiting for things to get better, waiting for things to happen, hoping that things will change in a couple of weeks or a couple of months or a couple of years. That's living in the future. Coming to the here and now, that's where allowing is, that's where peace is, that's where love is, that's where freedom is. Number 9, playing the victim. It can be really, really addictive to play the victim. You know, I think we all might have played the victim at some stage in our lives. I don't know. I know certainly I'm familiar with that when I was a kid. got a lot of attention. It got an awful lot of attention for me, you know, and people will come and they will comfort, and it's a great role to play. But I think we realize again in our spiritual path that playing the victim and that role, it keeps us trapped in a level of being, and it's a story that we start running through our mind, and we start communicating through our words and our actions. So playing the victim is a way that causes us suffering. Seeking comfort over growth. As somebody said, very wisely said on our retreat, nothing grows in the comfort zone. And if we stay in the comfort zone, we don't grow, and it causes us suffering because everything stays the same. And then what happens over time is things get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, and we get smaller and smaller and smaller, and that causes us more suffering. So getting out of our comfort zone helps us to grow and expand and reduces our levels of suffering. Denying parts of ourselves as well. You know, it's always an interesting one on this spiritual path. There's lots of spiritual teachers who are completely amazing, but deny their shadow side completely. And we all have a shadow side. We all have a part of ourselves that we don't like. We all have traits that we're not comfortable with. We all have certain tendencies that we try to kind of push down. But the Buddha talks about the shadow side, and how denying your shadow side actually denies and stops your potential for growth. Because in delving into the shadow, you get to learn things about yourself, and you get to transcend those parts. And then I also wanted to see if any of you have any ideas of anything else that would cause suffering, maybe for you or for anybody else in your life as you're going through this list. Is there things that is jumping out at you that might be contributing to your suffering or the suffering of somebody that you know in your life? You can pop it in the chat, or you can unmute yourself, but I wanted to open it up and see and ask your opinion on this, and also to see if this is kind of triggering you or kind of landing well with you, making sense as such.
I heard there's a great quote. It's kind of like the past and the future. It's kind of like I don't live in the past and the future as well, but I've said it many times, and I've had people I've said it to say it back to me, is never have a conversation with somebody who isn't in the room.
Very good.
So I think that's what I know causes me suffering, is like to get inside other people's heads, you know.
Yeah, brilliant. Love it. Thank you, Helen. Really good. Yes, that definitely go under number 12. All right. Anybody else feel that too? Their hands up for that one. Is that 2 hands up, Marga? And Trina, how are you waving?
Bit of both.
Oh, a bit of both.
No, I love that. And actually, just even as Helen was talking there's a book I just started called The Untethered Soul.
Oh yeah, Michael Singer.
Yeah, somebody sent it to me. And actually, I'm just on the first chapter. But in fact, just what Helen said is literally what I remember from reading it this morning. So
he has have you listened to his episode of Oprah's Soul Seekers, or what's her?
Oh no, I haven't. And I listened to her podcast, but I haven't.
Yeah. Oh, his one is fantastic.
Oh, great.
Just look it up. And his one is brilliant. Yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah. No, I love that. The ones that jumped out at me while I'm off mute were the kind of the clinging to your identity and the resistance to impermanence. Because even though I like a bit of change, you know, I get a bit, if things aren't changing, I kind of get I just get bored, you know, so I do like a bit of change, but I still think that there are things that I would cling to about, you know, the kind of the persona, you know?
Yeah.
And I've probably, you know, the work that we've all been doing over the last year is probably helping a lot of that. But I do find myself having to having to give myself little inner chats all the time about that, going, hang on a second, you know, is that really, you know, important to you, or is it just part of the external rather than part of what really drives you? So, and kind of what are you making excuses for? So I think those are very interesting. So I'll pick those up for this month. Great list, Ellen. Yeah, great list.
Yeah. Thank you, Trina, and thanks for saying that. And it's true. I mean, that's the thing. We have to be compassionate with these, with ourselves, with these, because this is what, you know, is fed to us all the time, is cling to your identity, that you are this. I am a woman. I am a mother, or I am a, you know, we have all these roles that our ego needs certain amount of criteria to be comforted, to know exactly who we are, and to kind of, but there's a separation that comes with that as well. And also that identity is fed to us through the media and through stories and through social media and all of that as well. So it's to be really, really conscious of being gentle with ourselves for this month, if you're going to work on your cause of suffering, if you want to kind of bring in some compassion and acceptance and allowing with maybe an area, 1 or 2 maximum of these that might cause you a certain amount of suffering. Because, you know, the Buddha, as the Buddha says, you know, pain is inevitable. It's not going to say that something isn't going to happen that's difficult and challenging in your life. No matter what you do, no matter how much meditating and mindfulness and spirituality you do, you will never avoid painful situations. You just won't, because that's what's being human. But it's our response to it that is the suffering part. Now, let me clarify that with just a little bit of information. It doesn't mean that you don't deny the pain of the situation. So I wrote about this in my newsletter, you know, I don't know if you read it, but it's not as if, it's not, for example, if you stand in a nail, you stand in your nail, the nail goes into your foot, that's bloody painful, that's sore. Pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. Suffering is not saying, oh, there's a pain, there's a nail on my foot, oh, okay, that's not sore, that is not sore, that's definitely not sore, because I transcend all pain. That's bullshit. You know, that is denying how you're feeling. And that is going to cause suffering as well. So what we do is we say, okay, that is a pain. That I've put my foot on this nail. This is freaking painful. This is really painful. We might shout and scream. We might try and swear at the nail, as we always do. We feel the pain, but then we don't keep going on about it for, you know, for the day afterwards, telling everybody, oh, I stood on the nail and it's still really sore, hobbling for the whole day. We don't elongate it. So we don't deny the pain of something happening, because to, you know, it feeds into number 11 to 9 parts of yourself. You know, pain is there, we recognize it. This is sore, this is crap, this is shit that this has happened in my life. I am so pissed off that this has happened. I can't believe I stood on this nail. We express that in that moment, and then we let it go. Because to keep going on and on and on and on about it, that causes the suffering. And we all have those situations in our life. We all can probably go, God, I remember a breakup that I went to a number of years ago and I still feel the pain of it. Well, that's the suffering that we're holding on to. Or I remember somebody said something to me in school and I still feel the intensity of that and I still carry that with me. That's suffering. And that's what we can alleviate. And when we let go of the suffering there, then automatically that energy gets transformed into compassion. Because the natural resting energy, or the natural expanding, breathing energy of the soul is compassion. And Michael Singer talks a lot about that, actually. He's such an interesting life, and it's all about surrendering and taking the path of least resistance, of avoiding suffering as much as he could, and led him on an incredible journey. He wrote a book called The Surrender Experiment as well. That's really interesting. But the Untethered Soul is amazing too. So what I'd like you to do is, all right, we're going to come back to this in a minute, because that's the way that we can cultivate some compassion. And I'm going to share these slides with you so you can print this out. And my invitation for November for you is to write a note. So I, Ellen Schilling, for example, promise that I hereby commit to consciously limit my suffering every day for the month of November. I will do this by practicing compassion, acceptance, and allowing when and wherever possible. When I forget, which I will forgive myself, but I will start again immediately. Signed, dated, witnessed. You can edit this as much as you want. You can add in your area of suffering. I'm going to live in the moment as much as I can. I'm going to choose love over fear. I'm going to let go of identity to myself. I'm going to embrace impermanence and look for it and flow with it. Whatever you want to do, you can edit it, but to have it in this format, print it out and put it up on the wall and work with that in every day. Now, what we do when we notice we're in suffering, which is the internal dialogue, for example, the foot on the nail. I can't believe I did that. Oh my God, I'm so stupid. I stood on the nail. That's absolutely ridiculous. Who put that there? I bet you it was himself. He's never cleaned up after him. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, that's the suffering part. That's going into the story of it. When you notice you're in the suffering, you stop and you're going to give yourself compassion, acceptance, and allowing. The compassion piece can be done by this little 3-step process we're going to do in a minute. It can be through the Metta practices that we've used before, like may I be well, may I be happy, may I find peace within. Or you practice acceptance and you say, okay, what can I accept about this situation right now? And it might be, I can accept that I'm really feeling throbbing pain in my foot right now. And that's what's there. I'm not going off into the story of why the nail might be there, who put it there, what that leads to, blah, 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 blah. I'm just accepting what's here in this moment, which is the pain that's in my foot. And I'm allowing that to be there. Okay, this pain is here. This pain is here. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't have to contribute to anything. It doesn't, because if we start allowing ourselves to think based on or from that place of anger, we can end up taking action. You could end up picking up the phone to that person. I can't believe you put that nail on the floor. You know what I did? I just stood on it and I'm really sorry, blah, blah, blah. And you started off an argument. You know? So this happens all the time with all of us until we become aware of what we're doing. So acceptance, just, okay, I'm in pain. My foot is in pain at the moment. I'm not taking any action at all on this until this is passed, and allowing that pain to be there. And sometimes that pain will be momentarily, like it is with a standing on a nail, or sometimes that pain will be longer if it's heartache or if it's grief or loss. Sometimes that pain just needs to be there for a period of time, but we allow it to be there. That's not suffering, that's working with the energy of the pain that's there. Suffering is holding on to it and delving deep in it, allowing it to become your story, becoming the victim with that pain for longer than it needs to. And sometimes you need to stop and reflect and contemplate, what you think, am I suffering here, or am I actually feeling this pain? And you'll get to know that difference as you work with this as well. Okay, so I'm going to send that to you as well, so you can work with that if you want. So that's my invitation to you for November. Okay. Is that okay with everybody? Just want to see if there's any questions at this stage, because I know I'm talking about suffering, but I think you all probably know it. Grant, thank you, Helen. Grant, okay. I'm assuming everybody else is all okay with that. Marga's okay, great. Okay. So what do we do instead when we're in suffering? Thanks, Annie. Is somebody in the chat? Yeah, Grant, Marion, cool, thank you. The best way to interrupt suffering when we're in suffering, or when we're noticed that we're in suffering, because sometimes we go, oh my God, I'm beating myself up. I can't believe I'm beating myself up. This is ridiculous. Never be able to learn about suffering because I keep beating myself up. And then you're beating yourself up for beating yourself up. We don't know how to stop. What's the antidote to that suffering? And compassion is the antidote to it. Kristen Neff is, thanks Fiona. Kristen Neff is done, and Chris Germer have done great work and loads of amazing books and talks and meditations and so much stuff on compassion. They are both in the scientific field. Chris Germer, I think, is a psychologist, and Kristen Neff is a psychiatrist, one or the other. But they both come from a scientific point of view, and they talk about compassion. And compassion is the antidote to suffering. So when we notice that we're in that suffering state, we practice compassion. I mentioned one of the ways before, using the traditional Buddhist sayings of may I be well, may I be happy, may I be at peace. Kristen Neff has come up with a different way, and this is what we're going to practice in our meditation. This is going to be recorded and on as an audio meditation on your library, so you can use this as many times as you want. Okay, so where is it? when we're going to the meditation, I'm going to get you to think of a situation in your life that's difficult, that's causing you stress in some way. Now pick something simple. Don't pick anything that's like an 8 or a 9 or a 10 out of 10 on the stress scales. Pick something just until you get used to working with this. Think of something that's maybe a 2 or a 3 on the stress scales. Something in your life that's difficult. It could be a habit of somebody else. It could be a presentation that you have for tomorrow, or it could be something that's upcoming, or it could be a situation with a friend, or so on and so forth. Pick something, and I'm going to ask you to bring that to mind during the meditation. And you might think of something now, but when we get to the meditation, something else might pop in. So be open to that happening. And when you get into that situation that is difficult, you recognize it. It's a little bit like the rain meditation of Tara Brach. Recognize it of this is a moment of suffering. Okay, so you could also say this hurts. Ouch. This is stress. You're not in it. When you recognize something, you're stepping beside it and just saying, okay, this is suffering. I am suffering at the moment. Second step is to recognize that suffering is a part of life. It's common humanity. This is where we connect with that sense of other people and a shared experience. Like other people feel this way. I'm not alone. We all struggle in our lives, or somebody somewhere is feeling exactly the same way that I'm feeling right now. Then you put your hands over your heart, feel the warmth of your hands, and gentle touch of your hands on your chest. And the third step is you offer yourself compassion. Something like, may I be kind to myself. You can also ask yourself, what do I need to hear right now to express kindness to myself? Is there a phrase that speaks to you in your particular situation, such as, may I give myself the compassion that I need? May I learn to accept myself as I am? May I forgive myself? May I be strong? May I be patient? That's it. 3-step self-compassion break. This can be done in a meditation like we're going to do, or it can be done as you're walking down the road. You know, if you notice, I'm suffering here. Okay, this is suffering. I'm giving myself a hard time for this situation. This is suffering. This hurts. This is hard to live with. Somebody else in the world is feeling this right now. I'm not alone in feeling this. And may I be strong. May I be patient. May I forgive myself. Just those 3 steps. They can take 30 seconds. They can take 30 minutes. You can delve into them to make it a longer practice, or you can just keep it as short and sweet as you want to. But it's a really beautiful 3-step process that makes compassion, which is so heart-opening, so freeing, so beautiful, so needed in our lives, and makes it so accessible and doable as well. And the more that you get into this, the more you can start working on bigger situations, but starting with the smaller ones and building up to those bigger ones as well. Okay. So suffering, non-suffering is a teaching of the North. We're across the threshold now from autumn into winter, from west into north. The North is all about reflecting, going inwards. Suffering really keeps us stuck in emotions, stuck in situations, not able to see the way through. And letting go of suffering is one of the teachings of the North, and one of the teachings of Buddhism as well. And we're able to let go of suffering by recognizing where do we suffer most, and then by practicing compassion. And that's it in a nutshell this evening. Okay, let's do a meditation that incorporates that. Let me put on music. If you have questions, now is a good time to stop, to unpause yourself and to ask away.